Shalom. This week we are reading Parshat Ki-Tetze, and the Parsha gives us an opportunity to discuss the concept of mercy. Heavenly mercy versus human mercy, or rather, the quality of mercy, but by whose definition or on whose terms. There's a very unusual and special commandment in this week's Torah portion. It's a special mitzvah, and it has to do with sending away a mother bird. It's called Shiluach HaKen. Sending away a mother bird from its nest. It's in chapter 22 and verse 6 we find the following. If a bird's nest happens to be before you on the road, on any tree or on the ground, young birds or eggs, and the mother is roosting on the young birds or on the eggs, you shall not take the mother with the young. You shall surely send away the mother and take the young for yourself, so that it will be good for you and prolong your days. I'd like to explore this remarkable, somewhat unusual biblical commandment. Now, actually, there's a tradition that associates this action of shooing away the mother bird, this mitzvah, this commandment, with the quality of mercy. For example, the Midrash states that just as the mercies of the Creator extend to man, so they extend to animals, to birds, to every living thing, every little creature. So let not the mother bird see you're taking her young, because that will cause her great distress. Now here's something really interesting. In the Mishnah, which of course is the body of the oral tradition, comes from Mount Sinai, the same tradition, the sages of the Mishnah in Tractate Brachot declare the following. If a person is leading the congregation in prayer, and he makes his prayer, he spontaneously offers in this form his words. He says to God, "May your mercies reach us upon the wing of a bird." Such a prayer should be silenced. In other words, the form of such a prayer, which of course this fellow is obviously referring and alluding to this biblical commandment found in our Torah portion of sending out the mother bird, such a language, though, such an expression of prayer is deemed improper. And one opinion expressed in the Talmud explains that the reason this person is criticized is, and I quote, because he is assigning all of the Holy One, blessed be He's attributes as the attribute of mercy. Now, as he's saying, God's qualities are the qualities of mercy, and as Rashi clarifies, but that's not the case, actually, because God did not give the commandments to Israel because of mercy, but rather they are the decrees of the king, so that Israel should know that they are His servants. We observe all of His commandments and ordinances, even those that we do not understand. But let's understand the depth of what Rashi is really teaching us here. He's not saying that this particular commandment of shooing away the mother bird is not a manifestation of God's mercy and His compassion for His creations. He's merely saying that such an explanation and an answer should never be considered as the answer all, the supreme explanation and rationale for the commandments. You know, that we do them because God is expressing His mercy. Because such a line of thinking can lead a person to have disdain for any of the commandments which that person in his limited intellect doesn't understand or doesn't fit in with his way of thinking. I mean, even in a situation wherein a person clearly understands the obvious moral or ethical reason behind the performance of a particular commandment, that's nice, you know, that it appeals to us, our logic or our sense of ethics or morality, but we're still obligated to perform the commandment, not because we understand it, or because we think it's fair or just, but because God has commanded it. Whether or not we think it's right or wrong, He's commanded it, period. And if an individual's approach, one's approach to our relationship and our obligation to God is based on this understanding, then we will also perform and observe those commandments that perhaps we don't understand. But a person who is, to quote the expression there in the Mishnah, a person who is assigning all of God's attributes to the attribute of mercy, who's saying that everything is about God's mercy, that person will find himself confronting maybe some mitzvot, some commandments of the Torah, wherein we don't see this quality of mercy, and this logic will trip us up. Now, the great Maimonides, in his explanation of the same Mishnah, he actually states that the commandment of shooing away the mother bird is a mitzvah of obedience, that God has commanded it, and it's forbidden for us to rationalize it as an expression of mercy. That's in his commentary on the Mishnah. However, in Maimonides' more philosophical work, The Guide to the Perplexed, he does indeed say that we don't deny the existence of the aspect of mercy in many mitzvot, such as, for example, the commandment of shchita, of the proper slaughtering of an animal that makes it kosher, and the prohibition, for example, of slaughtering the young in the presence of the mother. These issues are issues of suffering. We don't want to cause an animal suffering. And when Maimonides, for example, speaks about shchita, about the slaughtering of an animal, he says this is not an issue of seichel, of logic. This is an issue which has to do with the power of imagination and is a motive, because just like a person, an animal has a sense of suffering. There's no difference between the suffering of a person and the suffering of an animal. So he explains that this particular commandment is indeed it's a revelation of mercy in creation. When you send away the mother and she doesn't see you taking the young, you are preventing her from suffering. And there's a balance in the various opinions that relate, for example, to this commandment. Those that teach that it's always important to look for a rational explanation and to understand the reasoning behind the mitzvot according to logic. And also Maimonides, according to that direction, yes, there is a quality of mercy that's inherent in this commandment. So he explains that from our perspective, he doesn't disagree that there is a rationale of mercy in this mitzvah, but it's forbidden to ascribe human qualities to God. In other words, when the sages say don't think of this mitzvah, this commandment of shooing away the mother bird, as being in any way dependent upon the quality of mercy, he really explains to us that God implanted many of the commandments of the Torah with the quality of mercy in order to instill this quality in man. And in fact, the idea of the mother bird roosting over the baby or the eggs in the nest is an example of a special type of mercy, because if confronted by someone trying to take them, she could flee, but she will try and defend them with her life and reveal an exceptional quality of mercy. So it's forbidden to take her and take advantage of that at this time when she's going to be displaying this quality of mercy. And there are many more ideas here, like the continuation of the species and all sorts of deep issues around the topic of this verse of shooing away the mother bird, not to mention even the special connection between this commandment and the promise of the blessing of longevity, and the connection between this commandment, the fulfilling of this commandment, the shooing away of the mother bird, and the mitzvah of honoring one's parents, because the commandment of shooing away the mother bird and the commandment of honoring one's parents are actually the only two commandments about which Torah specifically states that it will grant one a lengthening of days. Now, there's also a mystical view of this topic, the Kabbalists, those that delve into the deepest secrets of the Torah. And they explain that when the mother bird is sent away, she wanders about crying, and she fills the world with her suffering. There's an element of pathos here. And somehow this arouses the divine aspect of mercy on the world, the Kabbalists explain, not only for her, but for all who are suffering. And this in turn awakens God's mercy for those young that were left in the nest who were distanced, and this is actually a metaphor for us. And in this light, we can actually understand that there's a difference of opinion between the sages, a question of Jewish law. This whole procedure of shooing away the mother bird, is this something that is to be done when a person, according to the verse, is walking along the way and is confronted, falls upon a nest in a tree or on the road? Is a person supposed to do this only if they want the eggs? Or is a person actually obligated to do this, to shoo away the mother bird, even if one doesn't want the eggs? It's a wonder, because one of the major codifiers, the Ran, he explains that clearly a person who doesn't want the eggs is exempt from doing this commandment. But that's according to those rationalists who see this commandment as a matter of mercy and the issues regarding the suffering of the animal. And therefore, in a situation where one doesn't want the young, it's forbidden to cause needless suffering to the mother, because after all, the major purpose of this mitzvah is for the sake of mercy. But those who subscribe to this deeper understanding that there's some sort of reaction on a cosmic level to this mitzvah, they maintain that one is actually obligated to do this whenever finding a nest with a mother bird and eggs or young, because the process somehow creates mercy in this world. Now, all of this is obviously some amazing topic having to do with how God relates to his creations, the created universe, how we interact with those forces in understanding this whole elusive commandment and it's one of the commandments of the Torah, which applies today, to shoo away the mother bird. But there's also a deeper underlying concept to all of this. We've all but said it outright when we said that this parasha, and specifically this commandment, offers us the opportunity to discuss the concept of mercy, heavenly mercies as opposed to human mercies, the quality of mercy, and by whose definition or on whose terms. Because this whole discussion really relates to a person's conception of God himself. There are those who define God as love, and they say, God is love. And that sounds really nice, but what happens when you feel that you're getting a raw deal? Or what happens if what is happening or what is being commanded doesn't appear to be according to my understanding or my expectations, doesn't appear to be love at all? The truth is, this idea, this definition, God is love, is not an authentic Jewish concept. It's certainly not rooted in the Jewish Bible. It doesn't work. And it isn't a truth or actually even a possible definition. We all know that God is the supreme being, the cause of everything, who brought forth everything from nothing, the creator, who has no beginning and no end, and importantly, who has no form. But we just learned that the danger, and actually the prohibition, of ascribing him human characteristics, from a major Jewish perspective, if we had to say anything, we might say that God is truth. But even that is a very feeble attempt to pin God down in human terms and to ascribe him human characteristics. And while it's true that God created the world because he loves man, as David tells us in Psalms 89:3, the world is founded on love. Again, as we stated early on, if God is only love in human terms, then what happens when he commands me something that appears to be cruel according to my understanding? And that line of thinking can lead a person to have disdain for any commandments which this person in his limited intellect does not understand or doesn't fit in with his way of thinking. Bottom line is that our obligation is to God, not the other way around. Our obligation is to God because he commands and we fulfill his word. And he commands us to shoo away the mother bird. At the same time, for example, he commands us to destroy the nation of Amalek, including the women and children. Because that same God, the God of love, the God of mercy, tells us that Amalek must be completely obliterated from this world. And that commandment includes the livestock, the women, and the children of Amalek. And this is remarkable, because maybe that's why, in the conclusion of this very Torah portion, that features what may be famously the supreme example of God's mercy, of a commandment that He gives over to us, which is so totally saturated and motivated ostensibly by His mercy, which is shooing away the mother bird. This very Torah portion of Ki-Tetze ends with the commandment to utterly obliterate Amalek from the world. So here we read, end of chapter 25, remember what Amalek did to you on the way when you were leaving Egypt, that he happened upon you on the way, and he struck those of you who were hindmost, all the weaklings at your rear, when you were faint and exhausted, and he did not fear God. It shall be that when Hashem your God gives you rest from all your enemies all around, in the land that Hashem your God gives you as an inheritance to possess it, you shall wipe out the memory of Amalek from under the heaven. You shall not forget. So we are commanded to destroy a nation to its very memory. And when we define God in human terms and try to make Him fit our little box, we are actually committing a great disservice. We try to make the one who created us in His image recreate Him in our image, and that doesn't work. So our goal is to constantly update and renew our commitment to our obligations to God, because He has commanded us, just because.